It's John. First off, I hope everybody had a really good Christmas and has been doing well in general, as well also has a good New Year. A lot of things came up, and not to make excuses, but I wasn't able to last week get my picks out on Patreon, which I always do. I don't think we missed a day for like the first year. Even if I was looking for tennis picks, I was getting something on there, but I wasn't able to get this week of football on the Patreon. Essentially, they were no different than my video. The video I did last. We actually did really good in the video for last week. My last video that I did, but I forgot to get them on Patreon, so I do apologize for the people on there. I did just post all of our plays. Basically, what I do is I post the lines that I like, the teams, of course, kind of like when I go through here. The only difference on there is I kind of go based off of who I like the least to the most, and I recommend particular units to be wagered. But I do apologize for the folks over there. Like I said, going forward, especially with basketball heating up, we're probably gonna have more plays than ever over there. Just was a little bit hectic. So didn't really play Thursday, Saturday games, which there was a handful of. For some of these were, I'm not gonna lie, for me they'd be coin flips. We probably would have split them, to be quite honest. I think we probably would have missed Chicago because I probably had Seattle covering, if I'm being honest, and Chicago actually covered because of the lineups and all that stuff. I thought Houston made sense, and then by the same token, I thought Kansas City would have made sense. And then obviously today, the Bengals were the obvious win. That one we predicted that game last week when I saw they were playing this week. I told people in my last video, went into why the Bengals had to win last week and they had to win this tonight. Because now, conveniently, it keeps them where they just need a win and a Broncos loss. Broncos are playing the Chiefs, and the Bengals get in. So I thought they would, at the very least, give us and of course there was a WWE style finish to the Bengals game, but I'll take it. But anyway, we still have a good bit of games coming up, so I want to go into them. Rams-Cardinals here is a little. If the Cardinals had, if they weren't mathematically eliminated, then he would. Oh, that's nice. Sorry about that. Anyway, so for the Cardinals Rams here, I would really believe in the Cardinals a little more had they not been mathematically eliminated. Rams play the Seahawks next week anyway. You can see 9-7. Rams with the opportunity to improve to 10-6. I'm not sure the exact tiebreak. I believe if the Rams win and then the Seahawks play the Rams next week, they would tie. I believe that the Seahawks have the edge, but I don't know because they played twice. I forget who won the first game. I remember it was that. I think it was that. Wasn't that really boring, low-scoring game? Either way. What I'll say is, and again, by the time this video is out, this game is going to basically be final. But my logic is, if a Rams win eliminates the Seahawks, then I think the Cardinals are going to get this. If a Rams win doesn't matter because the Seahawks can beat them next week and they would get in, then I would probably say the Rams probably win. So, again, not one, unless you're doing some live action. I'd say I lean Cardinals, to be honest, but it's really a game that's doesn't have many ramifications. So let's run through these. Jets-Bills. Right off the bat, I like the Bills cover. I said this at the beginning of the year, and honestly, it's pretty interesting because I was a Jets fan when I watched years ago, and I guess if people asked me, I'd say I would say I think it's scripted, but I would also say I guess if I had a gun to my head, I'd go Jets. And in this year, watching the Jets, they really remind me a lot of another team. And they've basically just copied each other all year long. It's pretty impressive. So I have a coworker, and she's a diehard Bears fan, and I don't know who has it worse, to be honest. I think we both have it pretty bad, but I see a lot of similarities. So as you can see, same record. The Jets with a loss would have the same record. Both fired their coach. Both had a quarterback that I think people had high hopes for this year. Both had a defense that I think people had high hopes for this year. And there's just a lot they have in common. And I think they're going to finish out the season by getting beaten pretty badly, just like their their sister team here, the Bears. And at the same time, I think they're going to be really strong next year. So I've been noticing a lot of similarities with the Jets and the Bears. So I think they're going to build them both up for next year. Whether the Jets stick with Rodgers, I don't know. But we'll go into all that at another time. I do notice this, and I know other people have told me too. Even across sports, like people have noticed similarities with teams like the Warriors and Chiefs. And you look at just the idea, right? If they're really just kind of setting up schedules and setting up matchups and setting up rivalries and teams, so they match the culture, you're gonna have teams that seem very similar in my opinion. But just something I noticed: Jets Bears basically seem like the same exact team this year, and I notice it like every year with a different team. So it'd be interesting if they finish with the same record. I'm also curious to go back and see how many times they won and lost on the same week. It's almost like whatever the Bears do, the Jets just go ahead and do the same thing. But yeah, I just noticed that. So anyway, I think the Jets get pummeled. Again, if you remember, this is what they did with Manning, Brady. Manning would usually play better, and people would just admit he's the more talented of the two quarterbacks. And he'd get into the playoffs, and Brady would beat him. And I feel like they're running that back with Mahomes and Allen here. So Allen, I think he's going to go into the playoffs looking unstoppable, like always. Pummel the Jets here to make them look like the team to beat. Gets in there, probably has a great first round, and then probably loses to the Chiefs. I really feel like that's what's going to happen. Just so many Brady, Manning parallels with Allen, Mahomes. But for this week, I like the Bills to cover the 9.5. Titans, Jags. I'm taking the Titans. If you've been following the channel for a little bit, then I've been fading the Jags for a while. For really the sole purpose of I really believe they're going to get the first pick in the draft. If not the first, a top 3. So there's a lot of teams with 2 to 4 losses here, or wins, I'm sorry, that could edge out the Jags, the Bears, the Jets, the Patriots, a lot of teams, the Giants, the Titans. So we have handful Raiders here, teams with 2 wins. So Panthers. So you have so many that, in my opinion, you really need to get the Jags a loss here. I wonder if both teams will be trying to tank this game. But yeah, I also think a few more people might be on the Jags at home. Typically when you have 2 terrible teams, the public tends to go with the home team. But moving to London, they're getting a new stadium. Like, it just, to me, makes sense you give them a great pick. So I'm taking the Titans to win. They're an even record too. So it also comes down to tiebreak. So either way, one of these teams is going to have, stay on 3 wins. But I think that team's going to be the Jags. I think the Titans will go to 4-12 and the Jags 3-13. So I'll take the Titans to win this game straight up and get the Jags one step closer to that first overall pick. Panthers, Bucks. I'm going to take the Panthers to cover the 9.5. Part of me can see the upset because, with them and the Falcons, the Bucks and Falcons, it's probably going to come down to next week anyway. But I think the Bucks probably win the game. I think there's a good chance they both win, to be honest. I'm really tossed on the Falcons Commanders. So, makes me think maybe the Panthers win, but I think probably the Bucks win. But I do like the Panthers to cover. I've noticed they've been covering a little more lately. And they even have like an upset or two that I don't think many people expected. So, for a few different reasons here, I do like the Panthers to cover the 9.5. Raiders, Saints. Again, same kind of logic. I'm taking the Raiders to cover the 2 points. This will put them at 4-12, and there'll be a win, 1 win more than the Jags, which means again, just one more team that the Jaguars will have a better pick than. So, some of these I'm basing off the draft, others I'm basing off the playoffs. When you have 2 teams that have been eliminated, like the Raiders, Saints, then there's not as many narratives and things like that, so it's not as easy. But I like the Raiders to cover the 2 here. Cowboys, Eagles. This one I kind of went back and forth on, but I actually settled on Cowboys win. Yes, they are mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. You have the possibility Eagles lose, Commanders win, and now Week 18 could be very interesting. Come down to the Commanders possibly taking the division, But the reason I like the Cowboys to win is if you remember last year and the year before, I think it was 2 years in a row now, they kind of pushed this narrative that without Dak, the Cowboys were better. And I wouldn't say they've exactly done better, but what were they, like 2-5 when he got hurt? I don't know. They weren't doing great. I know that, and they have a chance of finishing with a plus 500 record here. If they win, they move to even. Comes down to the final week. So I think there's a really good, especially because of McCarthy. I think they like give the Cowboys some hope towards the end of the year. Fire McCarthy in the offseason. And even though he's got a ridiculous contract, they do this all the time, by the way. They just did it with Daniel Jones on the Giants. They might find a way to move Dak and try and push the Cowboys into next year. So for a few different reasons here, I do like the Cowboys to win this game outright. So I'll take the Cowboys here at almost 3-1 odds. Colts Giants. I am just going to go with the Colts. I'll take them to cover too. It's a little heavy, but and they might be eliminated too. I think they still have a shot. I'm not positive. I know the Dolphins are a team that is still alive. You see Tua is doubtful, but they're on the outside of the AFC playoffs, so they need help and all that stuff. So no Tua for the Dolphins, but they're playing the Browns, so it's pretty convenient. But I think the Colts, I'm not positive. Let's see if it shows. Okay, so yeah, the Colts are another one. They are still in it. And I went into this before. I went into this for several weeks, why this had to happen, right? Certain teams had to win certain games because now, for the AFC, out of nowhere, you have like this four-way race for the last wild card spot, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I just don't. And the Broncos aren't getting that bad. I've said it a million times. I said it when they were like 5-1 or whatever their record was. Actually, not to be braggadocious, but if you do go back and watch not my most recent playoff video, but I did a playoff video. At this point, it's probably been like 2 months or so, maybe even 3. And basically, I went into, it was like around week 4, just like last year. In the playoff video, I was wrong on the Vikings. I thought they were going to fall off. But I'd say on the AFC, we hit it pretty good. I had the Bengals, who at the time sucked, making a run and getting into the playoffs. And I just went into a million times about there's no way the Broncos are getting in. To the point where people should know how my channel works, but many people are saying things like, oh, you just hate the Broncos, you have to cope, all these different things. And I'm like, no, it's not the case. They're a boring team. They're not going to put them in the playoffs over the Dolphins with a returning Tua, or especially over the Bengals with probably the MVP this year, if not for their record. So, yeah, and then you have again, I went into the Burrow-Mahomes matchup, all these different things that we could get in the playoffs. There's no way the Broncos are getting in, so I like to wait on games like that and really put more units on them versus just playing games to play them. But that's another reason I do like the Patreon and such, because I can kind of put exact unit amounts for certain games, which will, of course, be indicative of who I like the most. So we'll go into the Broncos next week. They already played, they lost, and the Bengals too. We'll go into those two next week. My point being, Colts with a win, technically still in it. So I'm going to take the Colts to cover. They played the Dolphins, I think. I forget who won. So I don't know if a Colts win knocks out the Dolphins. I'm not sure about how all that works. Actually, it couldn't, because next week the Dolphins could actually just have one more win than them. So anyway, I got the Colts covering the 7.5, and I got the Dolphins covering the 3.5. Moving both to 8-8. Now you got a 3-way race. Actually, it'd be a 4-way race in Week 18 between the Colts, Dolphins, Broncos, and Bengals, with only one of the 4 getting in, and I think it'll be the Bengals. So, yeah, Colts, Dolphins both cover here. I like this one. I was looking at both. I like the Packers. I think if they can push something like all 3 teams, or 3 of the 4 teams in a division having 12 wins, that has to be a record. If they don't already have a record, because even if the Packers finished with 11 wins, that's pretty impressive. But it has to be a record for 3 teams to have such a good record in the same division. So between that and the line only being 1, and then it makes things really interesting for the Packers, Vikings, and Lions in the final week. I mean, they could all theoretically finish. Well, they can't all finish 13-4. one of them would have to finish 14-3, but because we have Vikings Lions in the last week conveniently. But I think the Packers take this game. I do. So I'm going to take them to improve to 12-4, keep things interesting. And then this one's probably my toughest call because between the line and a few other reasons, I do like the Falcons, but I don't think they're going to waste the opportunity with the Eagles and the Commanders, where the Commanders can take the division. If the Commanders lose here, Eagles clinch the division, and I just don't think they're going to do that. So I like the Commanders to win, and I'm going to take them to cover the 3.5 here. I just think it makes for a better story. Again, the Falcons-Bucks is still going to come down to Week 18 in most likelihood. And then we got Lions-Niners. And for this one, I actually do like, because I was looking back and forth, I actually do like the Niners. I just think it's a little light for the Lions. Only 3.5. The Niners have been terrible this year. The Lions have been pummeling people. So I think way more people are going to be on Detroit here. And sure, it could be a win, no cover, something like that. But even, I see more people taking the Lions just on the money line with some, maybe make it into a parlay. So I think way more people are going to be on the Lions. And again, a Niners win makes it interesting. Lions and Vikings would both be 13-3 going into the final week. And it would obviously come down to Week 18 for who wins that division. So you can see there's still a lot of action going on the last couple weeks. And again, a couple weeks back, if some of these teams had lost, then it wouldn't make any sense. They'd already be eliminated. Like if the Bengals lost last week or something like that, tonight wouldn't have mattered. Bengals Broncos, it wouldn't have mattered because the Bengals would have already been eliminated. That's why during the end of the game, I was watching to see if the Broncos tried to tie it, which they actually did, which was smart. Because obviously a tie would have put the Broncos, they would have clinched their spot. And I'm like, let me see if because some coaches are just so stupid. I don't think it's the coaches. I really think it's scripted. And in that situation, they might go for the win, not understanding a tie is just as good. But of course, the Bengals wound up getting it, which again, I think anybody could have called. So yeah, I think we were 11-2 last week, maybe 11-3, something like that. I had a really good week, and it was mostly just picking. We had some underdogs, but for the most part, just picking the only teams that made sense for an entertaining and appealing playoff picture and end of season. So I'm using that exact same logic for tonight. Well, not tonight, but the video tonight for tomorrow. And I think it's going to wind up helping us a good bit. I think we're going to have another really strong week. So yeah, I hope everybody has a good new year. And then, like I said, I think we have a pretty strong day tomorrow. Take care and happy earnings.